everyone. It is me, Sherrod DeGrippo, Queen of Darkness here. And with me, I have Chloé Messdaghi and Crane Hassold, Principal Security Researcher, and Chloé is our lead Microsoft Digital Defense Report. How is everyone doing at 5 o'clock today? Really well. You all look great. You don't look like you've been here all day, so you look rested, attractive. This is my favorite audience, I think, of the night. We are here to talk about the Microsoft Digital Defense Report. We realize that it is 5 o'clock on a full day of Ignite, so we're going to keep it fun and light. We're going to keep it audience participative. And I'll start with a question to the audience to begin. You have two choices, nation-sponsored threat or crime. Raise your hand if you like nation-sponsored the best. Okay, we got a couple people. Raise your hand if you like crime the best. Raise your hand if you just hate threat actors in general. Pretty good. Raise your hand if you are a threat actor. Please leave. I'm going to have you escorted out. Give me your badge. All right, so let's get started. Chloé, you worked on creating the Microsoft Digital Defense Report. Can you kind of tell us what that process is like? It's like a lot of pages, right?
Oh God, it is shorter this year, okay? It's shorter, so you can read it. So to give you a backstory, there's 23 teams and departments that came together to create this year's MDDR report. And that also means about 200 people participated in this report. So you're getting the best of the best, and a lot of people participated in it in this year. And for this year, we also want to make sure that you can also take pages out, so you can print them out. And there's a couple of pages I always recommend, which is the first one is the key takeaways of the report. You should actually print that out and put it somewhere, and then just keep an eye on it for the entire year. It should be your guide. I recommend that. And then there's also, it's broken into two parts. One is the threat landscape, and the second part is the defense landscape. And we do give recommendations, also advice for each of those sections. So I do recommend checking those out.
So, Crane, I'm going to ask you, all three of us worked on the Digital Defense Report this year. We are three of those 200 people that participate. Looking at the MDDR this year, what are some of the things that kind of stick out in your mind as interesting threats that are there on the landscape?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, one of the things I loved about contributing to the report is sort of being able to see the complexity of the landscape across all of what we see at Microsoft, which is really fascinating because the cyber threat landscape is massive, very complex, a lot of overlap. It's just fascinating. So the visibility that we have when constructing the report has been great. As far as what things I think the takeaways are, for me, going to the cybercrime, which in my opinion is the best, is
that's right.
is really the social engineering side of the house. So you know, I've been in looking. I haven't been in social engineering. I've been researching social engineering for in one way or another for the past 20 years. And what strikes me as just fascinating is really how the concepts and the tactics that a lot of these actors have been using and that we see over the past year in the MDDR statistics are like, it's the same thing, just a new flavor of it. And it's the same tactics that have been used for literally thousands of years are the same tactics that we see being used in a lot of the cyber attacks. The only difference is now a computer is sort of the medium to get people to click on links or open bad attachments. But the sort of understanding how actors are manipulating the behavior of their targets is fascinating to me.
I liked that as well. I think one of the things I found interesting in the Microsoft Digital Defense Report this year is the way that threat actors are using the same social engineering techniques that they've used for a really long time, but they're able to scale and go so much faster because they're using the technology specifically for that.
Are you talking about AI?
What's that? I am talking a little bit about it.
We've checked the AI box. We've now checked that box.
Does anyone know what AI is, or should we? Have you heard of it? It's popular, right? Well, I think, I think AI has definitely allowed threat actors to scale, go to scope beyond what they've been able to do before, get really custom with things, go faster. Something I think that's important to realize too in a lot of ways is that when you think about AI, it's not just a tool. It is a tool, it's important. It's actually, in many ways, a new interface to data. So does anyone remember GUI? And then what was before that? Command line, right? So you used to type into your DOS prompt, because you were all using Windows 3.1.1. You're at Ignite, come on. So you had your command line interface, whatever operating system that was on top of, and then we went to GUI, so we had graphical interfaces. And now we're at this sort of chat interface where you can use natural language to not just view data, but really interact with it, really learn about it and analyze it. And I think that that's something that when we see threat actors leveraging the ability to use natural language against data that can be advantageous for threat, it gives them almost superpowers in some ways.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, it makes the cyber criminals are using AI in the same way that most of us are using AI. They're making things more efficient, more productive, more effective, helping them to learn new tactics. It really helps, I think, at the pre-attack behavior, sort of understanding the reconnaissance, prepping for things, and the post-attack, where they're able to consolidate, analyze everything that they've compromised much more easily. I think it was when we were recording the podcast, you brought up something that I hadn't thought about, but it was fascinating. Sort of like all of the breaches that have been out there for years now. Like without AI, it would take someone a considerable amount of time to be able to go through, triage that, say how many usernames, passwords, be able to analyze it and help them understand that. But now with AI, that can make that entire process much more seamless and efficient, and sort of understanding previous breaches and that data and being able to use that data more effectively is something that AI, I think, probably has a lot of uses for.
Anybody in here a big user of regular expressions? Any regex geniuses in here? Oh, maybe a little bit. No one wants to admit it. The ability to find credential pairs in data is really something that's very hard to use regex for, because you need to have the exact perfect syntax to find those things in email, in code, wherever it may be. Microsoft alone uses 40 different types of authentication pairs: usernames, passwords, service principals, tokens, keys, certificates, etc. And so having an LLM trained on breach data makes it really easy to not have to write a regex, but to say, go through this large sea of data and find in it every time someone mentions any kind of authentication, any kind of credential. And so again, it goes back to that idea that AI is a new type of interface to data. It's a new type of interactive talking to data, working with data that we haven't had before. So Chloé, I want to ask you a little bit. We talked quite a bit about crime, and we'll come back to crime, don't worry. I want to understand from what you looked at in the MDDR, what did you see in terms of nation-sponsored threat? What stuck out for you there?
Nation-sponsored threats. So I would say one of the things that we did talk about was, in particular, there was 4 countries of focus, of course. So you have Iran, you have Russia, you have China, and North Korea. And what we kept seeing was the same industries pretty much being targeted. And those would be your IT, your government agencies, research and academia, think tanks, and NGOs. And one of the things about this particular report is that we kept seeing again and again research academia being a target, even for cybercrime, not just nation state. And I think that was one of those things that made us kind of like, oh, we're not surprised, but at the same time, it's kind of interesting to point out. Like BEC, that was research and academia, most of it. A lot of cases of like password spray, brute force. We saw a lot of those cases happening to research and academia. And it was just ongoing to see that. I think that's one of those things that we definitely pulled from this year was that, and also, of course, AI. If people haven't heard about it, it's this thing called artificial intelligence. I had seen how, as defenders are using AI to, be able to protect, but also to secure, we're also seeing, adversaries using it for malicious things as well to help them automate their attacks, also for phishing purposes, and then also for creating malware. So those were the things that really stood out, I would say, in general.
I think that's important to highlight, and I think that many of those use cases that you just mentioned really are the use cases that we've seen threat actors do, as you said, for maybe not thousands of years on the computer, but since the invention of technology to be able to do those things, and they're just leveraging AI as another tool in the arsenal to be able to create their campaigns. Chloé mentioned BEC, Crane. Take it away.
Yeah.
Jinx! No. Okay.
So first, maybe give an intro of what BEC is, and then any new trends that you're seeing on landscape.
Yeah, so BEC, business email compromise, the definition that I use when it comes to BEC is one of those terms that has sort of morphed over the years. When I talk about BEC, I'm talking about a social engineering attack that is using impersonation to elicit something of value from someone else. It's not an actual compromise. Like there's a lot there, what I'm not talking about is like a credential phishing campaign that's going to actually compromise business email credentials, which probably is what it used to be. But I'm talking about sort of like pure text-based social engineering tactics. And when it comes to business email compromise, what's really interesting is sort of how these actors are evolving their tactics in a little bit of a different ways year over year. It started out as BEC was, impersonating the CEO, targeting someone on the finance team or the CFO, saying, "Hey, we've got this vendor, we need to get paid. Can you send the money?" It morphed into that into payroll diversion scams, which were really popular, especially with some of the fintech banks that are out there. Then it turned into like the gift card scams. And now what we're really seeing is the third-party impersonation being the primary mode, one of the primary modes for BEC attacks, where you're now compromising an actual third party through something like a credential phishing campaign, using intelligence collected from those mailboxes to then target that third party's customers in a way that can create very realistic looking emails using context that's totally legitimate to then target someone else. And so that is, that's pure social engineering, right? That is trying to get someone to do something they wouldn't otherwise do by using impersonation tactics. And so that's sort of where the landscape has gone there. And I think, that's going to continue to evolve and adapt, especially, with things like AI, as they can make sort of these more realistic-looking lures to sort of coerce financial gains a little bit more effectively.
One of the things that I find really interesting about BEC is that it doesn't use a malicious link. So there's no URL a lot of times. It doesn't use a malicious attachment. So there's no malware a lot of times. It really is like pure weaponized communication. It's purely just weaponized text, which is so interesting if you're able to do that at scale, if you're able to do that in these really customized ways that AI enables. I think that BEC is probably going to be one of those threats that continues to gain traction. And I don't like making predictions, but I'll make a little sort of forward-looking question, which is, BEC is one of those things that is less demanding from technical skills. You don't need a ton of technical skills to do the pure social engineering side of it a lot of the time. And I wonder if AI is going to enable single individuals to be better threat actors, not necessarily needing a group of people to be a threat actor. Crane, do you think that's possible? I
think it's possible. Well, what's also really interesting, so I've been in the BEC world for 6-7 years now, and I mean I've researched it at scale. I've talked to some of the guys, some of the people that are behind these attacks. What's really interesting to me is that there are these tools out there that could probably make these actors' jobs more efficient and effective, like just a pure automated script to send a whole bunch of emails. They don't do that. Almost every BEC campaign that I still look at today, these guys are sending emails manually, one at a time, because that's just what they do. And it works well enough that something like an automated script, taking the time to build that script, the ROI is not there. And so that's when it comes to AI, I wonder how many of these actors will actually leverage those tools because, you know, it still works, right? And things like Nigerian print scams, right? Those, they're still around 30 plus years later because they still work, because these guys are still making money. You know, it doesn't matter that maybe 0.001% of the people actually fall for them. The ROI is still there because all I have to do is click a button, send a bunch of emails, and then people just send the money. And so until for all the financially motivated actors out there, until the ROI gets to the point where the profit margins are reasonable enough for them to adapt their tactics, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing.
Anybody in here ever gotten one of those text messages that's like, hey, this is Melissa, remember me? And you're like, no, Melissa, I don't remember you. And maybe they even call you a name that you're not, like, hey, David, this is Melissa. Do you want to go to the barbecue? Those are kind of part of that pure social engineering landscape where the threat actor will just go back and forth with their target for days, months, weeks until they can finally get them usually to deposit into a cryptocurrency fraud of some kind, or maybe a romance scam or something like that. But I'm really wondering how AI is going to accelerate individuals who maybe aren't in the game at all right now. They see AI as like vibe threat. Like they can just kind of figure it out with the right AI assistant. Chloé, let's talk about nation-sponsored threat using AI. What are we seeing there?
Great question. So in the last 6 months of when we were putting together the report, we noticed a surge of use of AI for influence operations. These were used for AI twinning. I don't know, anyone familiar with AI twinning? You could raise your hand. Okay, so basically imagine that you're watching BBC and there's an anchor on there talking to you and it looks so believable, like you would never question it. AI twinning is that. It seems like it's absolutely real deep fake of a news telling you about some breaking story. So AI training has been being used, also data poisoning in models as well. And then of course we have to go back to deep fakes like voice cloning and masking. And these are things that are quite scary. And when we were talking about email, for example, I want to just bring that quickly back. One of the things that we thought was kind of interesting was that the click-through rate when you are using AI automated emails for phishing had a 4.5 times more likely that you will actually click it. So you see things that are so much more believable and they look identical that it becomes scary to try to figure out, is this real or is this not real? So I do hope everyone here do teach your loved ones certain things, such as when they go to websites to really check that URL, that when they go to there isn't any like, I don't know, typos in it or like homograph differences. So such as like, you would see it might look like an M, but it's an R and an N in the URL. So these are things just to really keep an eye on and really do share with your loved ones because they're also the ones that you have to be careful of, not just your companies as well.
I think that's really important. Is anyone going to be around their family maybe next week? Anyone going to see family? No, I see one person who's like, absolutely not. Do they ever make any of you be the like family IT person? Raise your hand if you love it. Who loves fixing printers? So when you're doing that, in all seriousness, if you run into a family member that has like really old Wi-Fi infrastructure that's not been updated in who knows how long. It is kind of nice to help get updates to routers and APs and things, because we do have incidents of China-based threat actors leveraging home office and small office routers to base attacks from. So they essentially will compromise those routers. Many of them are end of life, unfortunately, so you might have to make a trip to purchase new hardware if they're end of life, and update those for your family so that they're not being used by threat actors as a base of operations. Just kind of a nice thing to do for the internet. I know, going back to the crime side, in the report we saw that something like 19% of threats were ransomware based or extortion based. So Crane, kind of tell us what you're seeing on the ransomware landscape and where you think that stands today.
So ransomware is still around, obviously. It's clearly evolved from, I think one of the things when it comes to ransomware and other types of cybercrime activities, sort of figuring out where it starts is really interesting. So initial access brokers are they're the main guys in the underground economy right now, because not just ransomware, but other types of attacks really start with someone who has sent a phishing campaign or has an info stealer that's just collected a whole bunch of credentials, and they're the ones that are selling access to companies, to individuals' accounts, whatever. And so the access broker side of figuring out where the ransomware attack really starts, ransomware is you're really at about the third stage when that ransomware is actually deployed. The initial access could have happened a month or so prior, and then sort of the recon as that initial access is then used is sort of the next step that you might actually see if you're a defender. But it's all about extracting money. It goes back to the financial incentive of these threat actors to, and what fascinates me about ransomware is the business-like mentality that most of these guys have. The big ones that are out there, they have chatbots, they have live chats with customer service people where, if the backups aren't getting redeployed well enough, they'll help you through it, because it's all about financial incentives. If there's a ransomware group out there that you have a victim who has paid but doesn't get their data back, that's going to impact their future earnings. And so ransomware actors sort of deploying the ransomware itself as a mode of extracting money is one thing. And then the extortion, I think, is really, where we're headed. Ransomware was lock everything up and you can't get access to it until you pay me money. I think we're moving to the encryption side, I think, is probably starting to go the way of the dinosaur, and now we're getting to, I'm just going to steal all your data and I'm just going to release it unless you pay me money. And so now you're getting to pure extortion.
I think something that's interesting about that too, I've been tracking ransomware for a really long time, and what I think is the interesting shift in the landscape is that, in this modern era, we're going from encrypt the organization so that they can't do business, which doesn't mean encrypting 100% of the organization. It means encrypting just enough to shut them down or slow them to a halt, essentially to where you've got that leverage to get the ransom. But we've also seen instances where the threat actor has extracted that data, gone through the data, and then found incriminating evidence that they could use to maybe apply pressure to the organization to get them to pay. We've seen them say, not only have I gone through your data, I've found these really unsavory pieces of the data, maybe something about mergers and acquisitions, maybe something about a lawsuit, and I'm going to extract those pieces and start selling them to other threat actors or start releasing them publicly. So threat actors are always creative, perennially have lots of new ideas that they use. And so I agree, I think we're going to see ransomware start changing into a situation where the threat actor isn't just doing encryption and moving on. I mean, we're even seeing that today where we have threat actors like Vanilla Tempest calling executives at their target organization and saying, I've kidnapped your child. What are you going to do? Give me the passwords and usernames to get into your systems, or I'm going to call in a bomb threat to the school of your kid. They're doing that kind of almost like extortion, criminal type behavior that is working but doesn't require encryption and ransom.
We
That's-
did, oh, sorry.
I was going to say that's a lot of work to encrypt and then restore. That's a lot of work. So why would I do that when I can just
Make threats.
tell someone to send me money and they do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things what Craig was sharing about, maybe encryption, we're going to start seeing reduction of that. We actually started seeing a huge difference this year. Reading a thing in here, one sec. So we saw that attacks reaching the encryption stage have slowed and are now increasing at a rate of 7% since 2024 to 2025. But if we compare it to 2023 to 2024, it was 102% of an increase. So there is definitely a change happening on that.
It's interesting. I know that there have been instances of threat actors using the data for incriminating leverage against the organization before they even get into the encryption phase, just because it's a faster path to potentially getting paid.
Also, EDR is getting pretty well
Yeah.
at seeing if there's encryption about to happen or occurring, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm targeting towards data exfiltration as well.
So, Chloé, I know, let's talk regionally. So we saw in terms of the top targeted countries, I know it was the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and then followed by Israel, as well as other countries.
Israel, then Germany.
Israel, then Germany. So what can we take away from the geographic pieces of the targeting there?
Okay, so US companies, you are unfortunately probably targeted the most. If that's ransomware, if access brokers are targeting you, it's the US. Nation states, it's the US. US is absolutely the number one. And then depending on, like, for example, access brokers, I think it was US, then it was, I want to say, could have been Canada, and then it was UK is one of those things. So it just depends on what areas in particular, but the US is far more targeted. I mean, ransomware in general, I think it was like over 50% of the cases were based in the US.
And is there anything that we can kind of understand in terms of like why threat actors might be targeting the United States? I mean, we could come up with a lot of ideas, but was there any trends pulled out of the Digital Defense Report that show us that?
So if we were talking about ransomware, one of the things that we saw was companies that their annual revenue was 50 mil or less. Those were the most targeted ones. So I would say that's one thing that I can pull out that might have some similarities with that question.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about tactics. We talked about social engineering. We talked about CredFish. What else are we seeing in terms of where threat actors are starting?
Ooh. So ClickFix, I would say. ClickFix, since November 2024, we've seen an increase of the use of ClickFix. Also, uses of InfoStealer have been rising as well.
InfoStealers are really interesting because there's a variety of different types of them, and essentially it's a piece of malware that gets on your machine and starts scraping information wherever it can out of that particular host. And there's so much variety in them. Crane, I know you work with InfoStealers a lot too. Some of them will steal everything out of your browser, saved passwords, anything like that. But others will like go and find cryptocurrency wallets that you might have. They'll look for logins to social networks. I've seen one InfoStealer that really focused on Reddit. Like it would go through and I guess it assumed that if you were a Reddit user that you also maybe had bad security hygiene. I don't know what the full follow through there was, but it would get like your Reddit login and look and see if you had cryptocurrency wallets and a variety of other forums and things like that to try to steal cryptocurrency. What are you seeing with InfoStealers, Craig?
So InfoStealers are really interesting. It used to be that malware or like financially motivated malware was like very specific, right? It would go after one specific type of thing. We've now seen like most financially motivated malware, the big ones are very modular. that they are able to be essentially like Swiss Army knives and do a whole bunch of different things based on what the user, whoever's using them, wants to do. And you're right, like it can go through passwords, or it can go and break directly into someone's bank account. It can just scrape a bunch of information from someone's email account. It can do a whole bunch of different things. And that, I think, is really interesting because it goes back into the overall cybercrime economy. It's about these actors that are developing and providing these tools to other cybercriminals that are, from a business perspective, trying to differentiate themselves from their competitors. Essentially, it says, hey, you can do all of these things. The one-stop shop of doing all of these different malicious things with you just using our malware. We see the same thing with phishing as a service. Phishing as a service to all the big guys out there. They're not just providing, a phishing kit that can be used to stand up a phishing site. They're also providing the infrastructure. They're also providing sort of a way to organize everything that they've collected, all the stuff that they've compromised in one place. So now you have sort of these more holistic services and products that are being provided in the cybercrime economy that these guys are offering to make it, more businessy.
Businessy.
Like
Decent business.
Lluma
Yeah.
in particular.
Let's talk a little bit about that. That's a great one. So at Microsoft, we have a digital crimes unit that Chloe works with closely. Crane and I love to work with them when we get a chance. They're amazing. But essentially, they're really focused on threat actor disruption. That's the key there with the digital crimes unit, is that they want to leverage things outside of defender signatures, things outside of technical means, host by host, to disrupt threat actor activity. And one of those was the 𝗦𝗲𝘀𝗀𝗍 takedown. Chloe, can you kind of give us some information about that one?
Yeah, so starting in, I think it was from March to May, was when this takedown started taking place. So the DCU worked cross collaboration with private partners in cybersecurity, and then also with the likes of DOJ, Europol, and JC3 to try to do whatever they can to reduce Lluma. So what they did, and by May, they took down, I believe it was 3,200 domains. And these domains acted as the infrastructure for Lluma. And then from there, what they ended up doing was that they blocked the traffic and rerouted it to a sinkhole. So it's still ongoing, but it's quite a good read. I do recommend it. It's in the report.
I think that that's something that a lot of people don't know about in terms of Microsoft's commitment to securing the digital landscape, is that we do a lot more than just defender signatures and security updates and things like that. There really is a focus on disrupting through every avenue that's available to us. One of my favorite coworkers, he's third after both of you, Kelly Bissell, works really hard to route out fraud within Microsoft's ecosystem as well. So as an example, let's say a threat actor compromises a tenant and starts using it for malicious purposes. His team and their entire mission is to make sure that we are evicting threat actors from Microsoft infrastructure, particularly when they're taking over customer infrastructure and using it for malicious reasons, which we see quite a bit of if you think about the feedback loop that Microsoft has, 100 trillion signals, 1.5 billion endpoints. We really get a lot of security signals that are both attacking our customers and sometimes coming from customer infrastructure that's been breached.
Yeah, and I will say, sort of also going back to the disruption side of things a little bit, one of the things that I love about working at Microsoft is the fact that we can use our resources to disrupt things more broadly than I think other organizations can. So, I've gotten this question, I'm sure you've gotten this question, I don't know how many times, hey, what's law enforcement doing to prevent these types of attacks from happening in the future? I worked in law enforcement for 11 years before moving out for the private sector, and I think law enforcement is doing as much as they can, but because of the way they do what they do, whether it's here in the US or in Europe or really anywhere, it takes time. Like it's not easy, and they have limited resources. So, we're not going to go out and arrest all the people. That's just not practical or possible.
I'll do it.
Yeah, but if we're able to do something like with Luma, where we can disrupt their infrastructure, even for a short period of time, we know they're going to come back at some point. We know they're going to adapt and sort of stand stuff back up because they're not just, because it's all about money. They're not going to be like, oh, hey, you got me. I'm going to go stop making money now. That's just not going to happen. They're going to, but at least there's been a little bit of a shift. They have to do more work to stand their infrastructure back up, and that sort of helps potential victims in the time. We did something very similar with Raccoon Stealer on the phishing as a service side of the house, where we disrupted a bunch of their overall infrastructure that they were using to both stand up the panels that were being used by customers, as well as the sites that were being used to host the phish themselves. And that, it's not solving the problem, but it is impacting the problem, and being able to use everything that we have at Microsoft to do that has been really gratifying and fascinating to sort of see how that whole thing works.
So we're coming to the end here, but I will open it up for questions in just a minute. But before I do that, and before we get final thoughts from Chloé and Crane, I just want to let all of you know, if you enjoyed this conversation, we do have the Microsoft Threat Intelligence podcast that I host, that Crane and Chloé have both been on recently, where you can hear all about the threat landscape, what threat actors are doing. I would love for you to check that out. I will leave with Chloé and Crane. Chloé, I'll start with you. What do defenders need to know?
Read the report. Everything's in there. But take a look at the executive summary for CISOs in particular. That one I would also point out if you want to start off light reading. But read the report, the full one.
I'll just add to that really quickly. You can look very smart to your boss if you take some screenshots of this report and make a PowerPoint out of it, and maybe
doggy ear the pages,
yeah,
highlight them,
like
put
I've
notes
been
in
reading
there.
through this, and we've found a lot of things we need to work on, and I need budget. I need a lot of budget. Crane, what do defenders need to know?
So I think there are two things just at a high level. One, we think of cyber attacks as these really technically sophisticated things, but when you really boil them down, there's nothing more than social engineering, getting people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. All the technical stuff usually comes second. So understanding the human side of cyber threats is really important. The other one is AI. This is like my soapbox, that yes, AI is concerning. Threat actors could do a lot of different things, especially if they're creative. But what's possible is not always what's practical. And just because you see all of these POCs that are going on out there that AI could do this or this or this, that doesn't mean that threat actors are actually going to adapt them, because they're generally out there to make money. And then also, while Chloé did mention that if an AI enhanced email does get to the target, they're going to be more successful. I think that's sort of common sense. But there are what AI does not do is impact most of the signals that we can actually use to protect and defend and detect those actual attacks. So yes, an email could look really sophisticated, could have a higher click rate, but if it never makes it to its target, doesn't make a sound. Doesn't really matter, right? So AI, scary a little bit, yes. It's one of these little scary things that are out there, but is it a silver bullet that's going to make cyber criminals all powerful and be able to get through any defense? No. So I think we just need to
pump the brakes.
Pump the brakes a little bit.
Pump the drama brakes.
Yes, the drama brakes.
So we have time for one or two questions. Does anyone have a question? Yes, you were first for sure.
So I'm from the city of the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh, okay, my dad.
Yeah. Obviously lived a massive impact from the JLR cyber incident. Just a thought really on whether government will make it illegal to pay ransomware to try and stop that ROI and that continual flow of money. Where do you think that could end?
I think we all probably have opinions. This is a spicy one. Thanks
This
for
is
starting
spicy.
us hot.
Hot take.
For those of you who didn't hear the question, essentially referencing the recent Jaguar ransomware event in the UK. That was very impactful. It was a very large part of the UK economy that was hit from that. The question is, should policymakers make paying ransomware payments illegal? Chloé, you are in the Department for Policy, so we'll start with you. This is not legally binding.
Okay, not legal binding. Don't go at it alone. Cross collaboration is so important. Work with your federal or your national, and yeah, I would say, and also make that decision with your company, what they want to do, what's best for them. But at the end of the day, you always want to do cross collaboration. Don't go at it all alone, and at whatever you do, don't do hack back by yourself either.
Crane, should we make paying ransom illegal?
I think, we could say yes. Because it definitely makes sense that if companies keep paying the ransom, that incentivizes ransomware actors to keep doing it. But on the other side of it, from a government policy perspective, I don't think it's practical to actually go through the actual legislative process to make that an actual law. I don't think that you can actually you would practically be able to do that. So that's a question that's,
This is a tough one.
it's been around. That question has been around for so many years, and this is like a great Thanksgiving
Get in a
dinner
fight with
conversation.
your family over Thanksgiving
Yeah.
dinner next week.
But that's just one. I think, that's a good question that I don't think we have opinions, but I think being able to get those opinions into actual practice is much more difficult than it would seem.
The only thing that I have to say on that is, when you make something illegal, what is the punishment? So are we going to make it illegal to pay the ransom? A company then pays the ransom, and then what? We fine them. And so they're going to start doing financial calculations of, is the fine worth the ransom payment plus getting back into business? And so I just think that's a tough one, not coming from a policy background, coming from computer nerd backgrounds. We might not necessarily have the greatest answer on that, but we will send that up the chain to our government affairs and policymakers and make them deal with it.
Yeah.
Any other questions that we can answer about the threat landscape, the Microsoft Digital Defense Report, or how it was made, anything like that? Yes.
I have a question more on the fact that Microsoft has an Azure environment in mainland China, which is hosted by 21 Did you use that data also in this report? And if yes, can you share a little bit of what the trend is on that side? Because to me, it looks like the other side of your business, right? Especially in the state-sponsored actors.
Chloé, do you know if that data?
I would have to check with the team that provided information to be able to answer that. But if you want to leave your information, I could get back to you, perhaps.
Any other questions? We have 40 seconds, so. All right, thank you all so much for coming. Please go party. It's party night. Let's hear it for Chloé and Crane. Thank you so much for joining us.